Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, December 23rd, 2021, coming to the end of the week, closing out the Christmas week, I guess, with our last visit with Jolly St. Craig, who will come with down the chimney with a sack full of stories. How about that? I mean, that's we can extend the metaphor a little bit this way and keep going with it. I don't know. Well, anyway. Let's see, just checking. By the way, this morning, the New York Times coronavirus tracker email does, in fact, already now include Loudoun County, Virginia in the roundup as requested. So at least we know that the right buttons got clicked there. We're doing terribly, but I think everybody is. By the way, I've noticed that the daily map of the top 10 states in terms of new cases on a daily basis. And remember, the daily basis thing is not really the thing you want to look at. I guess you want to look at rolling 7 and 14-day averages instead. But daily is what you get over at Worldometers, and I track it. It's worth something. But you should certainly hold it up against 7 and 14-day trends as well. But yeah, the day-to-day thing, you can, of course, look at trends and how the red spots on the map move over the course of those 7 to 14 days. Here comes the phone call from the person on my team that doesn't remember that I do a radio show at this point. Okay, well, we can't take the call. But at any rate, Greg says there's also 3 and 7-day trends. Anyway, that's where you want to look in case, I don't know, in case you're a scientist or something like that. But this data is there, so I compile it, and I like to see how the pieces move on the map. And it's been very much concentrated in the Northeast. There was this northern tier thing when, I guess, the dominant wave that was sending people to the hospital anyway, so that we were getting news of their infection and they were reporting their infections because they were going to get tested, etc. Delta was sort of distributed along the northern tier, upper plains, Midwest, and a little bit of here and there in the Northeast. But now it's very highly concentrated in the Northeast. So a very different sort of picture. And it's not clear whether the picture is that the virus is of a different kind, or that this is where the cold snaps have been and people have been diving back inside for cover, or whether there's something about Omicron, or that it's caught on there and will very shortly migrate and make its way to the Midwest and the northern tier of the mountain states, or whatever. I've seen a lot of people also making note of the fact that, I don't know, they were actually making political comments about the idea of, I think, and there's some validity to these comments, that I think perhaps the concentration on the danger posed by this wave of Omicron variant might be driven by the fact that the most serious infections, or the most numbers of people coming down with it day to day anyway, is up in the Northeast, where all the big newspapers are, and that when the Delta wave and others were ravaging the South, it was mostly the political classes mostly talking about and deriding the southern states' ability to handle these things, or talking about their reluctance to take up the vaccine or something like that. And there's probably some validity to that. Of course, we can test that because this wave will move to the rest of the country as well, and the South, which had been doing so poorly, has been doing much, much better in terms of the numbers that it's putting up and the day-to-day changes and the numbers of new cases coming in. They've been among the lowest for quite some time, which, unfortunately, I don't know, the way the wave thing works, of course, is it just comes sloshing back at some point. They're at a low node, and eventually their turn with Omicron will come, and it seems to be fast-moving thing. And Florida, by the way, has been jockeying to retake its old position, I guess you could say. Not that they're reporting it all that frequently, but when you do get numbers out of Florida, it becomes pretty obvious that Omicron has landed there too. Maybe northeastern snowbirds took it with them. I don't know if I can trace the provenance for you, but anybody who doubted that it would take root in Florida was probably just kidding themselves. So anyway, the time is coming, and the time for waiting for, as I said, Jolly St. Greg to come down the chimney is here. Good morning, Greg. How you doing? You've been leaving your cookies?
Stuck in that chimney. I really should have, laid off those donuts.
Probably a good idea. Oh, kids should be leaving donuts, by the way, instead of cookies for Santa. I don't know. Somehow there's traditional
Donuts and coffee, I think. Well, it depends what time of day they put it out, but
okay.
Always relevant in the morning, donuts and coffee.
Yep. All right. Well, let's see. Look at this.
So here's the thing about COVID and the Northeast, and also you have to keep an eye on the Midwest, because if you're looking by region, the Midwest and the Northeast are the ones that are spiking. Northeast is going to spike first for a variety of reasons. But Northeast and Midwest at this time of year, because this is a coronavirus and because coronaviruses are seasonal.
Okay, that's right.
You're going to have increased activity of coronaviruses in the colder states. Now, probably the reason, and if you look on that New York Times tracker you were talking about, there's a cases by region graph.
Yes.
I don't know if you have that handy.
Not handy, but
well, I'll copy it and give it to you, so you do have it handy.
It's handy now.
Right. So the whole idea there is something that a lot of the public health folks, especially at state level, are struggling with, because we have Delta and we have Omicron.
Yeah.
And whereas the CDC Omicron is 73% of cases is probably overstated because of technical reasons having to do with the fact that their measurement isn't really all that great and depends too much on states, and states can't do it. It means that we're flying blind.
Okay.
Connecticut has a slight rise in hospitalizations. It's probably Delta, but it could be Omicron. We estimate here that Omicron is going to be the dominant strain in a week or two. But is it now? We don't know, because we don't have enough testing. New York City, which is an international site where people come from all over the world, is more likely to have Omicron than the rest of the country first, except for West Coast, places that are in a similar situation.
Yeah.
And so if you look at the cases by region, Washington, D.C., New York, places like that, have the Omicron signature, which is straight up, but other places don't necessarily have that. They still may be dealing with Delta, places like Cleveland, and maybe even Detroit. So we don't know which one is which.
Ohio is being hard hit.
But they give you different effects. In other words, if you're looking at the cases, Omicron's going to make it skyrocket. If you're looking at the hospitalizations, they don't.
Yes, that's true. And thankfully, most of the charts that I have are just cases.
Right, and so you can be a little fooled by that. But what you also can't tell from that alone is how much of this is Delta and how much of this is Omicron.
Yeah, there's no way to tell that yet.
There's no way to tell that yet.
And there never will be, not in my charts.
Yes. So the point there is that, I see it, but I'm not totally sure what it means. Some of it is seasonal, some of it is Omicron, some of it is better measurement and non-suppression of information.
Yeah.
But, does that mean that the Midwest is going to get hit with the Omicron the same way as the Northeast is now? Yeah, probably. What about the South? Yeah, probably. But because of the differences in climate and weather, we're going to go first, like we always do.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I had been doing recently with those maps is I added an additional comparison. I decided to start, and sometimes it's helpful, sometimes not, but I'm comparing side by side the maps of the same date this year and last year. Where was the map lit up last year at this time?
Yes.
And sometimes useful. Enlightening, but that might reveal some seasonal aspect to things, and which directions the wave go and where they hit and how they move. So we'll see whether it behaves similarly or not.
Well, some things don't change. If you're vaccinated, you're protected much more than if you're not.
True, also.
Okay. And if someone kindly sent us an analogy that was going around, I guess, on TikTok.
Oh, yes. Oh, I played that on Monday, maybe, the test.
Yeah,
test
the
taking
testing,
and
right?
test answers. Oh, yeah.
If
That's
you
terrific.
get 60% of the test answers
Yeah.
and your buddy gets them but refuses to use them, and you do better on the test, and your buddy didn't, then you know why.
Yeah.
And
you
if
can't
your
say
buddy's
it's 'cause
holding
the
out
test
because
doesn't
he
work.
didn't get 100% of the test answers, well, what can I tell you?
Yeah.
The
Well,
country's graded on a curve.
right. It was a
And you fail.
good analogy, and and the idea of the class as a whole has done poorly on the test. We're simply going to have to take it again.
And that's your fault,
Please
not my fault.
take the answer.
You had the
key.
damn answers. They were right there in the syllabus,
Yeah.
and you didn't use them.
Isn't that really proof that the test doesn't work at all? No.
Exactly. So average daily cases, the unvaccinated 5 times as high as vaccinated. And average daily deaths, unvaccinated 13 times as high as vaccinated. That
Wow.
that really doesn't change. What does change though is this is the graph from the New York Times that I sent you just before the regional one,
Okay. Well,
and the cases are growing rapidly because of Omicron, but the deaths are not. And you can argue, well, that's because everybody knows deaths, take a week, take 2 weeks, take 4 weeks, because 2 weeks to get in the hospital and another 2 weeks to, run your course. But that's not what's
Possible.
happening.
Okay.
And we know that from both England and South Africa. John Byrne Murdoch from Financial Times is following South Africa closely and has an absolutely terrific graph he put together this morning.
More graphs.
Well, graphs are exactly what you want to do on a show where nobody can see what you're doing, but you can. So I keep sending them to you.
I'm having a revelation. The rest of you,
Not so much. So a situation update from Gauteng where cases, test positivity, and admissions are all now falling. That's South
Okay.
Africa.
Ah.
No, this is not driven by testing capacity behavior or by migration. Deaths and excess deaths are still rising, but based on the timing, they'll not come close to Delta levels. So what you see on that latest thing that I sent
okay.
you
I'm looking at Delta.
is a comparison of Omicron wave to Delta wave. The Omicron wave is faster. The peak is just as high, but it drops faster. Okay. Same is true with test positivity,
Fine.
not just cases, the percent of test positivity. But the hospital admissions have already peaked and they're way lower than
Yeah, look at
Delta
that.
was. And the deaths are way lower, even though they haven't peaked yet.
Yeah, that's good news because I was seeing some speculation that though it may be sending a lower percentage of the people who catch it to the hospital, if we are infecting 3 to 4 times more people than we did with Delta.
If you're
still gonna
unvaccinated, you're still at risk. Because
that's
if you're
definitely
unvaccinated, it's just the same as Delta. But
Yeah.
if you're not vaccinated, you're the problem. You're the person who made us take the whole course again.
Yeah. I managed to get in for third shot for one of the kids and follow up to Johnson & Johnson for the other. So we got
That's
in
great.
yesterday. We went to a different vaccine site, and the unfortunate part of it was that we had to swim through what I imagine is just a sea of someone in that 100% chance somebody in the hallways with us had Omicron. It was at a huge mall, and we had to go through the mall to get to the site. I was a little upset about that.
Right.
But anyway, they got the shots. That's good news.
Right. And my youngest, who is here from Berkeley, from San Francisco area, could not get a booster in California.
Right.
He simply couldn't make an appointment. They were all taken.
Uh-huh.
So we got him his booster yesterday, and it was very smooth. It took about 10 minutes, and the CVS wasn't all that crowded. It was steady.
good.
I mean, it was every 10 minutes the new person would come in to get their shot, and they were completely booked. But CVS in our area has made very clear you can't walk in, and so there weren't a whole bunch of people milling around asking.
Yeah, this place also took walk-ins. We had appointments. It was, by the way, I guess since we have listeners in the area, I'll just point this out because they have a ton of appointments available, and it's the only place around that just has same-day appointments I've not seen anywhere else. But the Fairfax County government Health Department site at the Tyson's Corner Mall in the old Lord and Taylor at Tyson's Corner Mall. Has plenty, and if you're thinking about it and you've been looking around and you just can't find appointments, try them, because when I opened their site yesterday, they said, later this afternoon, yes, absolutely, you can have appointments. So if you're in the Northern Virginia area and despairing of being able to get a shot soon enough, try them. Fairfax County's site at the Tyson's Corner Mall.
Right. I mean, people are trying. The state governments, the local folks are trying. Feds are trying. Mm-hmm. They want people to get their vaccines. And, this is one of those situations where they've been available, you don't want them. They've been available, you don't want them. Oh, Omicron hits, now you want them. They're not available because all of a sudden the supply side problem is that it's the demand issue. We know all about that now, right?
Yes.
And so now the demand is up, and so the supply isn't what it needs to be. They're trying to adjust, and that's great. Should they have done that 2 months ago? Sure. They should have guessed that Omicron was going to come, even though they didn't know it would. They should have.
Yes.
And prepared for it.
Well, we've had like 5 different variants.
But that's not the same thing. Right, exactly. We've had other variants that didn't really act that differently. So we didn't know when it was going to come. So you can ding them on that, and that's fair. But a little ridiculous to expect that. Well, that's I think Mike Lukovich or one of the cartoonists had a great picture of a healthcare worker being screamed at by a Trump guy saying, "Why aren't you doing anything about this pandemic?" And refused to take the vaccine and wear a mask.
Yes.
But why aren't you fixing it?
Happening a lot.
Why aren't you ending it?
Well, it's your fault. Well, that was also by design. And remember, this is not the first time that Republicans have gotten together and said, let's do something dumb and counterproductive for the purpose of making the Democratic president look ineffective. They did it to the last one.
So John Murdoch looks again at South Africa and says, let's look at the data in a different way. Cases climbed to 90% of the Delta peak already with the new peak, with the new wave. But admissions peaked at 50% and deaths will peak below 50% compared to Delta, demonstrating how immunity in South Africa, both acquired since Delta and differentially present among Omicron cases, reduces rate of severe disease. So the vaccines still work. There's announcements from some of the ones that the U.S. doesn't use, like AstraZeneca, Novavax, that they also work with Omicron to a certain extent.
Well, that's good.
And so that's all important.
Don't use it, but
the United Kingdom is finding data so far that may turn out to be similar to South Africa's. Everybody, including South Africa, will tell you it's too early to tell for sure. But, it is looking good. And I think that that's positive news and, something that at least you can be helpful about, even if you don't hang your hat on it.
All right.
So, this Omicron thing isn't going to overwhelm us. It is important to get your vaccine and booster, that is to say your full series. It will be the case that the Northeast will experience a bigger, earlier peak than the South, because we always do at this time of year. But everybody is vulnerable, and that includes Florida. And those states that are better at reporting their data, and for some reason, Maryland, for example, had a blackout for like 2 weeks. I don't know if that's been fixed yet.
Oh.
But nobody could figure out what was going on in Maryland, and they've got some of the highest vaccinated counties. But Omicron does break through that in terms of cases, doesn't break through that in terms of admissions and deaths.
Yeah.
So that's really the takeaway you have to take away. That is to say, the vaccines work for what they were originally intended to do. Mm-hmm. As we got better data, we started to think, maybe they even help protect us against getting infected in the first place, and to a certain extent they do. But with Omicron, not so much. And they're not perfect about that. So they do help, but it may be that ultimately everybody eventually is going to get this. But by the time they do, hopefully things will get better. We do now also have a pill, which is going to be emergency use authorized, EUA, by the FDA.
Yeah.
euthanized. We're all going to be euthanized.
Emergency.
So, there's positive stuff on the horizon. Oh, by
Yes.
the way, the economy's getting better.
That's
And
good.
so this isn't going to,
buy
stop
the
that
pill.
from happening. And next quarter should be much better than this quarter.
All right.
And when you go to the mall, they're crowded.
Yeah, I just did, and I didn't even mean to.
That there's even stuff on the shelves.
Yes, there is a lot.
And by the way, most of our mail is actually getting delivered, and
Right.
the packages are coming in faster than
presents
they
are
did
here.
last year at this time, and gas prices are down.
Right, I did
So
see
cheer
people
up,
saying, when are we
America.
going to see those articles?
Yeah.
Never. But tune in. We saw some articles somewhere, or else we wouldn't have known to tell you. About that blackout of information in Maryland. I don't know about the timing, but our noting of the blackout also coincides with the announcement that the governor has COVID. I don't know if they have anything to do with one another, but Larry
No, they blacked
Hogan,
that
he's
first.
got it too.
But he's got it too, along with some prominent senators and James Clyburn now,
So they stopped,
which
I
is
didn't know
of
that.
note because of his age.
Yeah. Well, the whole leadership. I mean, geez, can't have it sweeping through them.
But they've been vaccinated, so that's
Yeah,
good.
that's true. We have all sorts of fun treatments, although they're finding that the monoclonal antibodies don't work so well with Omicron. That I have heard that as well. So just
Right, so-
wear your mask.
Well, there is one monoclonal that does work, the rest don't, and that's hard to get.
Yeah,
But the pill
because it
should
works.
help. On the other hand, you got to be aware that there's a lot of contraindications for taking that pill. Like,
Oh,
for
I didn't know
example, if
that.
you're on statins, which are very, very common, you have to be careful with that.
Sure. Oh, I didn't realize that. So the pill and
Other
Statin.
pills can interact. That's where your pharmacist comes in.
yeah, I knew there was something where we had professional people doing something, looking after you. Okay, yeah, that's statins are for
Not all statins,
cholesterol.
but certain statins.
High cholesterol medications. If you don't know what you're on, that's
If you
it.
don't know what you're on, ask your pharmacist, ask your doctor. So, again, not a panacea, but certainly a help.
Okay.
So, all of that being said, it's still airborne. You still need to wear a mask. You need better masks. My advice, I don't care what CDC says, is if you can get an N95 or a KN95, you're better off. There are nonprofits that'll help you find one.
Yes,
If you're
right.
worried about fakes,
ProjectN95.org.
for example. Yep.
That's one I know offhand.
And when you get one through them,
Yeah.
which I've done,
Ah.
you can actually scan the box with your phone, and they'll authenticate it and show, yep, this is from the manufacturer. It's not a fake or a fraud.
That's good. Though I think it's a whole thing. They're a conspiracy to fake the confirmations. But okay.
Well, here's the big
Microchip
thing that's on the
something,
ticket
something.
now, and you may have heard last night, the Supreme Court said, yep, we're willing to actually look at this whole vaccine mandate thing.
Okay.
And we're so
How so?
interested in getting this done quickly, we'll start taking arguments on the 7th of January, which is pretty quick for them.
Yeah, I guess so.
So
After our vacation.
there's a nice explainer, box explainer, by Ian
classic.
Melheiser, who talks about the Supreme Court showdown over vaccine policies. And it's interesting because there's two different buckets of complaints about what Biden is doing.
All right.
Okay, and the first group has to do with what OSHA is doing. Now, a reminder, because this is important for the argument. OSHA stands for Occupational Safety and Health Administration.
That's right. Yes.
Okay, and they regulate health and safety in the workplace.
Yes.
And their charge is to try to protect the employees.
right.
And the burden is put on employers, and they exist because Congress, in a statutory way, created them. So, in
Yes.
effect, Congress said, we want OSHA to do this.
Right. Okay.
Okay, that's where they come from. They didn't just spring out of the head of Zeus full blown.
All right.
Okay?
So it's not
So they
just a
exist,
random.
and that
mandate.
means that their legitimacy in this area, seems to be real. Why do I say that? Because the Fifth Circuit said, oh, OSHA can't do that because what do they have to do with health?
Yeah. The H.
Well, the H doesn't stand for heaven, folks. It stands for health.
It will
okay?
for you if you don't follow the policies. But yeah. Right. I mean.
And that case, for reasons that are obscure to me,
just-
because I'm not a lawyer, actually was taken away from the Fifth Circuit and by lottery given to the Sixth Circuit. And the Sixth Circuit
Oh.
said, that's stupid. Of course it's health. That's what the
Ah.
H stands for. So go ahead and put the rule in. And so that rule stands for now. But the Supreme Court agreed to take that case, and given the Supreme Court, nobody wants to predict what they'll do.
Yeah, well, if
But
the
more on
Sixth
that in a
Circuit
minute, because
corrects
we do
it,
know
they say we want it.
we know about what the Supreme Court does with vaccine cases at state level. This is federal level, and the second round of cases involves a rule, says Ian Millhiser, promulgated by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services (CMS).
Okay.
The old
Alphabet
HCFA.
soup. Ah, HICFA. Yes. Okay.
Right, which requires nearly all healthcare workers to be vaccinated in order to protect the patients. And that includes the overwhelming majority of nursing home workers who interact daily with older residents. And CMS, even Jonathan Adler, conservative law professor, says CMS rule can be justified as a measure to protect Medicare and Medicaid recipients who were in those nursing homes, by the way, which is something CMS clearly has the authority to do. Okay?
You would think.
So you can't bet that the Supreme Court will do the right thing these days. But the point is, those are two separate challenges. So you have what OSHA could do, and you have what CMS can do. Okay. And that's at federal level.
Yeah.
At state level, they've already said New York State can regulate healthcare workers. They refuse to even hear that case. So if you want tea leaves of where the Supreme Court might go on this, it's not necessarily a bad ruling. And if they can get it done quickly, they get rid of all these nonsense lawsuits, that actually may turn out to be a net positive.
Yeah. Well, I guess you could always hope for that.
Well, but they've done that with the state cases.
That's
California,
true.
after that ruling, just passed a new thing. They're the second state that said, okay, all the healthcare workers have to get vaccinated now.
Yeah. Supreme Court says it's okay. They won't want to go back.
It's okay.
And they can be looking. It's not beyond
the headlines.
reason.
They know we're in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, and they don't want to get it. They're in danger of doing these things, as opposed to, say, abortion, which most of them just say, oh, well, I will probably never need that. And no one I know, or no one I'll acknowledge knowing anyway. Yeah, they tend to treat that differently. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Let's continue speaking with Greg about, all sorts of things. We've moved to the courts, still on COVID.
I'm not a lawyer, still pandemic stuff, but the legal thinking here is interesting. So in this piece from the New York Times from Monday, and things move so fast, this was only Monday that this article appeared. Supreme Court allows vaccine mandate for New York healthcare workers.
Yeah, all right.
And the legal reasoning is interesting, but also the history of what the Supremes have been doing when it comes to vaccines. Doctors and nurses challenged the state coronavirus vaccine requirement that had medical but not religious exemptions, saying it violated the right to free exercise of their faiths. And the courts, just like the military, said, you guys are making up this religious stuff. Come on.
Yeah,
there is no such thing. No. So the Supreme Court on Monday refused to block New York's requirement that healthcare workers be vaccinated, even when they cite religious objections. As is often the court's practice in rulings on emergency applications, its unsigned order included no reasoning, but Gorsuch filed a 14-page dissent, saying the majority had betrayed the court's commitment to religious liberty. Since this is so bogus, it gives you an idea that Gorsuch is just bad. He's a bad judge.
Yeah. But again, he too, he's been placed there with the
Barrett
expectation
didn't do
that
this.
he'll
Kavanaugh
make
didn't do this. Gorsuch did it. The quiet one.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess they each have different buckets of water to carry, and I guess the religious liberty one fell to him. So, All right.
And
I mean,
Alito
watch out for that
and
guy.
Thomas joined him, but
Yes.
Kavanaugh and Barrett did not.
Yeah, that is
That's interesting.
unexpected, I guess. But yeah, they may be believers in vaccination.
Now,
I wonder
but
what that means
here's
for
what else
Gorsuch
happened.
personally.
The Supreme Court in October refused to provide relief to healthcare workers in Maine who made an essentially identical request.
Yes, that I remember.
The court has also rejected challenges to vaccination requirements at Indiana University, personnel in New York City school system, workers at a Massachusetts hospital. The court rejected a challenge to a federal mandate requiring masks for air travel.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like automatic that the Supreme Court is going to rule against Biden because it's bad politics and so they want to screw him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've been pretty good on vaccines.
They've been pretty good on vaccines so far. That doesn't
They'll throw
predict
them a
the future. It's just, looking at what data we have, a theme for this week.
Okay.
Challenges to the mandates are pending in lower courts. In his dissent on Monday, Gorsuch wrote that the practical consequences of the court's decision would be grave. Thousands of New York healthcare workers face the loss of their jobs and eligibility for unemployment benefits, he wrote. These applicants aren't anti-vaxxers who object to all vaccines. Instead, the applicants explain they can't receive a COVID-19 because the religion teaches them to oppose abortion in any form, and because each of the currently available vaccines is dependent upon abortion-derived fetal cell lines in its production or testing, even though the Pope says it's okay.
Okay, well,
which he does.
What's he? What
Right,
authority does
so,
he have? I mean, come on.
New York State estimates 4% of the healthcare workforce have left their jobs. Okay.
Bye.
And Kathy Hochul, who's the governor, said since declared a state of emergency in light of a serious shortage of medical workers in upstate New York, exacerbated by the job losses. Again, we talked about this on the show. Medical workers come from the community. If your community is Trumpy and anti-vax, then your medical workers will be too, because they come from the community. And when we say medical workers, we're talking about everybody from people who clean the rooms to the orderlies to the x-ray techs. She's called the National Guard to assist, but it's unclear how many of the workers left specifically for religious reasons. A lot of them are bailing because they're sick of COVID.
Yeah.
And they get yelled at for taking care of it, and, it's hard.
Yeah, and
So if you can get out of it by claiming that you have a religious exemption, you're going to do that. Doesn't mean you really have a religious exemption in your head.
That's true. I mean, you could say, listen, I just want out of this job, and then once you're out of it, okay, well, maybe I will get vaccinated. Okay.
Right. So that's why the whole thing is fascinating here. Now, there was a 3-judge panel of the appeals court that dealt with Second Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals refused to block the requirement about doctors and nurses and such. And what they wrote, and here's, again, part of the legal reasoning, faced with an especially contagious variant of the virus in the midst of a pandemic that's now claimed the lives of over 750,000 in the U.S. and some 55,000 in New York, the state decided as an emergency measure to require vaccination for all employees who might become infected and expose others to the extent they can be safely vaccinated. This is a reasonable exercise of the state's power to enact rules to protect the public health. And contrast that with what Gorsuch wrote.
Okay.
I understand that this is a pandemic and a bunch of you may die, but I have my views on abortion.
Yeah.
And I have to protect people who agree with me. That's way more important than whether or not you die. That's basically what Gorsuch is saying to you,
because
folks.
of pro-life.
And my feeling about this is I think the Democrats really need to start running harder on what Republicans are doing to try to kill you.
Yeah, I mean,
that really has to be part of the 2022. Look around the country. We're talking about electing Republicans. Dave Wasserman, redistrict, in a very funny exchange on Twitter, his handle is redistrict, said the redistricting thing is basically turning out to be a wash. It's really not going to make that much difference one way or the other about who gets elected in terms of the 2022 Congress. What matters is Biden's job approval. And Biden's job approval is going to be dependent on how he does on the pandemic. Gas prices are already falling, economy's getting better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Supply chain stuff's easing. So it's all going to be about how he does with the pandemic. And that's why every court decision is a political decision.
Yeah, okay, I see what you mean.
Okay? And so the courts, the reasonable courts, are looking at this and saying a bunch of people might die. It's reasonable for the state to have a stake in whether or not you do. Lauren Boebert tweeted the opposite. The state has no business telling me whether or not I'm going to die. It's up to me.
Yeah, well.
Well, no.
That's not so, but yeah. But if you'd like to.
It's just wrong. It's a wrong-headed view. But the idea that, my personal religious views take precedence over whether or not you're going to die, well, run on that. Tell people that that's the Republican point of view. It is. And so if that's the Republican point of view, it ought to be clear who's helping you and who's not helping you.
Sure.
In a manner,
you're right.
and on a matter that matters now. You're worried that Democrats are going to close things down because that's bad for the economy and you need to feed your family? We're telling you we're not going to do that. Biden had a whole speech that told you you're not going to do that on Tuesday. But what you do need to know is Republicans are going to make it so difficult to actually fix this that it's going to make it difficult for you to go to work and stay healthy. And if you're a restaurant worker or works in some area that might get affected by the fact that there's a pandemic, leisure, those sorts of places, your job's going to be in danger, not because Democrats are being too strict, but because Republicans are not being strict enough. We don't hear that. We need to. It's important. It's true.
Yeah. Well, why not? Yeah, they ought to be making that point. I can see no reason why they should not, except that no reason why they should not. I mean, that's just
right.
True. I don't know.
So
why
an emergency application
there's
asking
plenty
the
of
Supreme
reasons.
Court to intercede. The healthcare workers in New York, the lawyers wanting religious exemption, wrote that the requirement imposes an unconscionable choice, and New York healthcare workers abandon their faith or lose their careers. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, no, except for Gorsuch.
Yeah.
And
Who's
the
more
two
Catholic
agreed
than the
with it.
Pope, as it turns out. So, okay.
Right? Protecting the vulnerable is a state job, and the state needs to do that.
Yes.
So, we know that the most conservative justices on the Supremes really don't care about you. And so, we don't know how they're going to decide. But it's interesting because Barrett and Kavanaugh and Roberts, presumably, may side with the rest of the court and say, yeah, no.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm trying to decide whether I think this means anything in terms of whether Gorsuch is himself vaccinated or he's just sympathizing with people. But and I think that's possible, that he would have taken the vaccine himself. But other people with genuine religious views, which I don't share and neither does the Pope, might think differently. Okay. But, also screw those guys, if you ask me. But okay. Well, don't ask me. Ask Kavanaugh and Barrett. They'll still say the same thing.
Right. So swerving a little
Okay.
back to politics here, here's a Washington Post piece entitled Biden Swerves Between Empathy, Uplift, and Frustration While Addressing the Nation on Omicron.
All right.
And that's a pretty fair summary of his speech. Biden's everyman. Everybody looks that way.
Yeah, here's the deal.
Even our friends are frustrated by it. Even the people who, got vaccinated and got their boosters and are wearing masks are still frustrated by the fact that they still might get sick. And, their sports is getting impinged upon, so it's certainly getting their attention. It's changing the way people get together for Christmas. You can't get testing, even though Biden promised that we're going to get tests. He didn't promise yesterday. He said it's coming.
Right.
And the Omicron wave is coming. It's not completely here yet. So, all of that can be true at the same time. And so there's a mix of emotions about how to approach this pandemic. And Biden was basically demonstrating his wide range of emotional acting.
Okay. He's getting a little typecast at this point. So it's
Well,
good for him to try to break
he can do
out.
all of those things. He can be the villain, the hero, all that stuff.
But all the same way.
Right.
Kevin
Meanwhile,
Costner
E.J. Dionne
impersonates.
writes something I think is true.
Oh.
For Biden, going all in against the virus is the key to everything else.
Okay.
Sometimes the most important thing a president can do is tell the country he's working on the problem that citizens are most worried about. And that's why, I've said on the show and elsewhere, and I still think that's the case, you need these updates. This is what we're doing. Even though it doesn't seem like, well, you haven't fixed it or you haven't done anything. That's not big enough. That's why it's important to pass stuff in Congress, guys.
Yeah.
We're working on it. We did this. We got more to do, but we did this. We got more to do, but we have that coming. We got more to do, but we have this. And that's the way you have to do it. That's how you handle incremental change.
With incremental announcements.
Right. And also, EJ says, one of the worst setbacks a leader can confront is losing his advantage on the issue that had been his whole card. For both reasons, Biden's speech on Tuesday was one of the most useful he's given for some time. It got both substantive and political work done. He's explaining how he's going to get on top of it, and so on and so forth. And EJ says there's many theories to explain Biden's declining approval ratings, which, by the way, have stabilized, not declining. But even a cursory look at the data suggests he's taken the biggest hits on stewardship of the war on COVID-19, once the foundation of his popularity. Well, it's also 18 to 39-year-olds. It's also younger people.
They're
the ones that want to go out and party, but also they're the ones that care about climate.
So we don't know why they're disappointed.
And
we have some
they care about student debt too. So we don't quite know, but it's that group that he's lost the most
strongly. Okay. Yes, I did see that was in the news, and well, there are a couple of reasons why that could be. Has no one asked them? Is this it?
Well, that's it exactly. So we're waiting for the data. David Frem writes in The Atlantic, Biden won big with a bad hand. Relative to his strength in Congress, the Biden administration has proved outstandingly successful. Remember, Biden is working with a Congress of 50 senators, one of whom is Joe Manchin and the other one is Kristen Sinema. And he's still getting a lot done.
Yeah, not so great. That is a tall order and probably ought to be pointed out.
Pelosi is so good, we ignore the fact that she's got like a 4-vote majority.
Yeah, it's pretty slim.
We just assume that whatever it is, she'll get it done. And that's because whatever it is, she'll get it done.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But it's only 4 votes. Anybody else in that
some
position,
of them are crazy.
We'd be screwed.
Very likely, yes. There's some real Joe Manchin wannabes out there.
Right. So from conservative David Frum, who's a never-Trumper, says, instead of fulminating against Manchin for calling quits when he did, Democrats might want to reflect on how much of their agenda got enacted, only thanks to the team spirit of a senator from a state that Trump won by 39 points. Anybody can win a poker game with a good hand. It takes a real maestro to play a bad one.
All right.
Biden won a bigger pool with worse cards than any Democrat president ever. He won the pool because Manchin gave Biden more loyalty under more adverse conditions than the moderate Democrats of 2009 gave Obama. Perhaps it's not the nature of Democrats to appreciate the glass half full, but half full it is. The Democrats have a year remaining. There's too little time to waste on recriminations. Just go in a different direction. So basically, what does that mean? It means give Manchin whatever he wants and then negotiate what you can on the rest.
If you think that will work, sure.
That's his pitch.
And he is David Frum making that pitch. You should
Right,
all
conservative,
be
never
aware
Trumper.
of that.
That's his pitch. It's not wrong. You have to see what else
he makes a good point.
Manchin will take. The problem here, and again, I'm going to tell you a story about my friend Clifford.
Is he a
you don't know
large
Clifford.
red dog?
It'd be very shocking if anybody knew Clifford, because Clifford was a friend of mine in junior high school.
All right, that would be shocking.
Right, and in junior high school, in
Cliff.
the senior year, junior high was 7, 8, 9, and then high school was 10, 11, 12.
Right, okay.
So 7, 8, 9, ninth grade, which was the senior junior high school class, had a election for class president. Class president was meaningless. It was basically a popularity contest.
There's no
but they had
pandemic to deal with. Right.
All right. So the real popular kid, who was the center on the basketball team, was running, was going to win, but you have to have somebody run against him. So the non-jocks in the high school class talked Cliff into running.
Oh, Cliff. Well, okay. Good
Everybody
experience.
liked Cliff, but Cliff basically was a conservative.
Oh.
He was Italian, like 85% of my high school. He loved opera, especially Italian opera.
Really? Okay.
Right? Wasn't into the Beatles and the Kinks and Herman's Hermits and all the other stuff that people were listening to in those days.
Okay.
He was a little different, but everybody liked him because he was really nice. So he runs, and about 3 days before the election, since everybody else had essentially crafted his platform, he decides, I can't live with this platform. I don't like it. Some of
Oh.
it's about the Vietnam War, and I'm just not comfortable. I can't do it.
Okay. Not that they
So all
control
of his
that
friends who
in high
wanted him to
school.
run deserted him, and he lost big.
Oh,
And what's the point of telling that story?
I don't know.
Because Cliff was Cliff. You can't make Cliff into something he's not. He is who he is. He liked opera. He was nice. Everybody liked him. But he was conservative, and he wasn't an anti-war guy. And if that's why you wanted him to run, because you thought that was important, even though the rest of the school didn't, well, that's the way it was. You can't make Manchin into something he's not. He's a conservative guy from a coal state. He's subsidized and paid for by industry in his state.
Yes.
That's how he collects money. He's a coal guy. So if you're going to sit down and try to negotiate with him about climate stuff, guess what's going to happen? He is who he is. He is who he always was. And he can say with a straight face to the camera, oh, well, I'm who I always have been. Yes, that's the problem, but it's also true. So, if all else fails, lower your expectations.
I guess there's that. Well,
What do you expect from him? From his right. He's done an amazing amount already, and he's not going to become a Republican. And any replacement in West Virginia is going to be a Republican. And so, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Negotiate with him. See what you can
get. Yeah, although there's also a theory in which he could have gotten by with a much lower profile and just going along with the program and then going back to West
He could have done a
Virginia
gazillion things, but Cliff is who Cliff is.
That is true. And Cliff, too. Well, he, too, also. No, look, if you're going to lose,
you can push me
might as
so
well
far,
just
and
do the
after that,
platform.
look, I can't do it. That's not who I am.
So. Although, you wonder about how
All right, I don't like
hard you were being
okay,
pushed
but
as
I
a high
still
school kid.
am who I am.
Guess that's true. And, all right, yeah, I mean, you could have prevailed on him. I mean, you might not have agreed, but you might have said, listen, you're probably going to lose this race. What's the difference what the platform is? Just finish this out and, let people cling to their dreams that you were going to beat the basketball team center.
Right. Cliff was going to lose anyway. That's the point, really, and Cliff isn't going to change who he is. So, yeah, I can come up with 72 different theories about how we should have approached Manchin, and Manchin is still who he is, and none of them would have worked.
Mm-hmm. Does Manchin like opera?
He likes houseboats. He likes Maseratis.
Yes, that he does. He seems to enjoy those. I think that's a little odd and out of keeping with West Virginia stuff, but you never know.
He is who he is, and if that's the kind of person you're approaching, lower your expectations. Get what you can.
So. Yeah, all right. Well, he's there. We have to do something.
And then finally, in the last 10 minutes of this segment here, let's talk about the January 6th committee, which is doing amazing things.
Oh, all right. Which one do you want to talk about?
Well, the chairman of the House Committee investigating the January 6th Capitol attack just wrote Jim Jordan, asking for information from the day, since he was apparently in communication with Trump and involved in efforts to challenge the 2020 election results in the weeks prior, or as Eric Swalwell added, and you're also used to looking the other way when crimes are committed, so you'd be a really useful witness.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's the second. Scott Perry was first, then Jordan. I presume in the next coming days we'll hear from the committee's desire to talk to Mo Brooks or Paul Gosar or Andy Biggs. Those are the big five in terms of who was involved from Congress. And although Green and Boebert, are their typical selves. They talk, they have big mouths, but they don't actually do anything. I don't know that they were the ones that were giving the insurrectionists the information about where the tunnels were and all that sort of stuff. But those five, they really need to talk to the committee.
Good. All right. Well, let's see if they do it. Or,
Well,
it's okay to have them
but,
come in and plead the fifth.
They should, yeah. From Chairman Thompson's letter to Jordan, we also wish to inquire about any communication you had on January 5th or 6th with those in the Willard War Room, the Trump legal team, White House personnel, or others involved in organizing or planning the actions and strategies for January 6th.
Yeah. He was asked about whether he talked to Trump, and yes, I don't remember. I don't know. I talked to him all the time.
Everybody talks to Trump. I talk to him all the time.
So, good. Willard questions. Can we see the phone records? That'll help us figure out whether you did or didn't talk to them and how many times. Don't know what you're hiding by not turning those over. That would be, well, I mean, I actually do know what you're hiding.
Remember, this is a fella that Kevin McCarthy wanted on the committee.
Yeah. One of the, you always try to get one of the perpetrators on the jury if you can.
As many as you can.
Yeah, right.
You'd like to have a whole jury.
I mean, it rarely works out, but, as a defense attorney, you would say, all right, well, yeah, if we could get that, I mean,
Meanwhile,
can I? I would love to have that. Oh, I can't. All right.
Scar McFarlane, NBC4 Washington investigative reporter.
Oh, yeah.
Had some news yesterday as he was covering this, he and others who were covering this. Big hearing is imminent in D.C. federal court. Accused Proud Boys January 6th conspirator Matthew Green.
Yeah, I didn't know this guy until
is scheduled to plead guilty, which he did.
Good.
Okay. Not only does he plead guilty to conspiracy and obstruction of official proceeding, that thing that Liz Cheney keeps mentioning as you can't do that. Anybody who's responsible for obstructing an official proceeding is breaking the law, and therefore that's Department of Justice stuff.
Breaking the law.
Okay, so 41 to 51 month sentencing guideline range for the deal, but it's a conspiracy case. So Green's going to have to pay $2,000 restitution to the architect of the Capitol. But here's the big news.
Yeah.
Okay, the sentencing date is March 10th, so we still don't know how much time he's going to do, but he's going to cooperate with the feds. The Justice Department just made an inroad into the Proud Boys, and that's big, says Scott McFarlane.
All right. Cool.
So while the January 6th committee is doing their thing, DOJ is doing theirs, different track parallel. And again, I don't know how it works. Certainly the DOJ gets to see whatever the January 6th committee comes up with. I don't know if it works the other way around, but they certainly get to look at whatever the DOJ is releasing publicly.
Yeah.
And make that part
it's happening. Yeah, I don't know if they're showing anything anything they feel that they need to hold confidentially at the DOJ. They're doing so to preserve the integrity of the cases they're making. They're not going to share it with Congress because that'll get out.
Right. But Congress can share what they have with the DOJ.
Right.
So it can go in that one direction.
Absolutely, and a lot of the crowdsourcing of identifications of people can run that way as well. They had their own, although they ended up not needing that back channel. As it turns out, a lot of FBI operatives were very interested in what was being put out by the crowdsourced, crowd, I guess.
Yeah, and found a lot of the videos that the perps had put up on social media.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then finally this piece, which is getting a lot of eyeballs. I don't know if you covered it at all yesterday in the second part of the show. Crisis of Command, the Pentagon, the President, and January 6th.
I haven't yet, so let's introduce it because there's plenty of stuff waiting. And
one of the most vexing questions about January 6th is why the National Guard took more than 3 hours to arrive in the Capitol.
Yeah, why?
Right? The Pentagon's restraint in allowing the Guard to get the Capitol was not simply a reflection of officials' misgivings about the deployment of military force, nor was it simply a concern about optics of having military personnel at the Capitol.
Yeah.
Instead, evidence is mounting that the most senior defense officials, and this article isn't proof, it's posing a theory, which is the third reason why they took so long, not just bureaucratic garbage, which was addressed by a new law that Biden signed that said that the D.C. police chief can call in the National Guard by himself, doesn't need to go through a big panel, which includes the Sergeant of Arms of the House and Senate. You can just call and say, I need it.
Okay.
Nor was it simply a concern about optics. Instead, evidence is mounting that the most senior defense officials didn't want to send troops to the Capitol because they harbored concerns that Trump might utilize the force's presence in an attempt to hold on to power. That if the Guard were there, then they would be sent in. And this doesn't totally make sense to me because the D.C. National Guard guy wanted them there as quickly as possible to quell the rioters.
Yeah.
But the theory here goes that statements by Trumpers of various and sundry kinds, including a testimony to Congress and by Chris Miller, the Defense Department chief, basically said that if these troops were used to separate militia and Antifa fighters, that could have been used as a pretext to invoke the Insurrection Act.
I see. Yeah, I don't really know why that would, but I don't think that they're. I
And
think
that, and
they're
that Milley,
thinking.
chairman of the Joint Chiefs
Oh,
of Staff, was worried enough about it, so that played in. Milley, according to
I
multiple
can see
reports,
it.
quote, feared it was Trump's Reichstag moment in which, like Adolf Hitler in 1933, he would manufacture a crisis in order to swoop in and rescue the nation
That is an
from it.
interesting twist
That's from
on
Cal Lennick and Philip Ruckerd's
things.
book. That's in Bob Woodward's book with Robert Costa. That's a New Yorker article. So there are published reports that Milley had this at top of his head. That's why this whole thing comes. It's not like totally made up.
Yeah, not
Doesn't
just
mean
a
it's
hat.
true. But
Yeah.
there's some evidence that the people were worried about it.
Now I have seen. Yeah, it's an interesting theory, and I guess it's as good as any of the other ones. The usual twist I've seen on it as well. Okay, well, okay, it's just an interesting variant of the same thing, that this was somehow supposed to spark the moment at which Trump would, do the if not declare martial law, do the next best thing and invoke the Insurrection
Right. Well, the
Act.
whole thing was that this was, again, predicated on the fact that Antifa was supposed to be there. Remember
Yes.
Will Bunch saying that,
Yes.
one of the big things is Antifa didn't show up.
Right.
But Antifa was supposed to be there, and Republicans were crying Antifa the day before, the day of, the day after, even when they weren't
Week
there.
after, month after.
Part of this theory, okay? And so
Right.
then the Guard was supposed to come and Insurrection Act invoked to get rid of Antifa, who wasn't there, which kind of spoiled their plans. And what's more, they write in Just Security, what's more, the evidence also indicates that the same concerns potentially explain why the Pentagon didn't approve deployment in sufficient time and authorized the deployment only after Trump eventually made a public announcement at 4:17 p.m. that he was not in favor of continued occupation of the Capitol. Only then were they deployed.
Yeah. When you wouldn't be disturbing anybody by emptying the Capitol at that point. The president has said it's
Right,
okay for
exactly.
people to stop rioting. Okay, well then we'll stop.
So
the
that's the
rioting.
theory, and then they put together their timeline, and that's it for my
right.
segment. And I will wind up talking
That's
to
not
you
that
on
different.
Monday, and
Yeah.
you can deal with what I just said.
Right.
You got
I think
any
I will.
complaints about what I just said? Talk to David.
Yeah, that's a fine thing for you to say. All right.
It's easy for me to say. I'm gone. I'm out of here. You're
All
still
right.
here.
Well, thanks, Greg, and have a Merry Christmas, if you will. Make your way down the chimney. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. I might just continue with the theme that Greg brought up with his Just Security article, because it is of some interest in that. I have a number of things that touch on military issues surrounding January 6th. So let's see, how long is, Just Security? Of course, it's like super involved. But yeah, I don't think it's, I mean, I was trying to describe it as a twist on a twist, but it's really kind of the same theory generally, and grows out of the same supposition that what really screwed up Trump's plans was the decision by Antifa forces, if there are such things, and there really aren't, to just avoid the whole scene entirely. And clearly there was a playbook set and ready to go, and there's really no other explanation. Well, yeah, there are few satisfying explanations for why Republicans who supported Trump even after the insurrection were so insistent on the storyline that it was really Antifa that was at the Capitol and really Antifa that was driving the violence. And the reason must have been, well, we thought they were going to be there. We had a foolproof plan to use them in order to achieve our ends, and the fact that they didn't show up can't be a barrier. We don't have any other playbook. We're just going to continue on and read these cards out loud because we've been assured, from watching Donald Trump, that the truth doesn't matter. And if you stick with the playbook and dig in your heels and never admit fault and just say you meant to do everything that happened, even if it was stupid, it works out. And for some reason, it apparently has worked out over Donald Trump's lifetime, but not everybody is as talented as pulling the wool over everyone else's eyes as Trump is. I don't know what it is that makes him capable of doing that to certain people, but it does seem to work. Because there's no logic to it, there's no way to transfer it to other people. It either works or it doesn't, based on I don't know what, some intangible. But, well, there you go. Let's see. So I think maybe if we say that Greg has summarized this thing well enough that we could move on to some of the other items in the pocket here about the military issues here. Let's see. I mean, there's the weird and somewhat humorous involving, tangentially the whole, some of the ex-military actors, like, for instance, notorious spy Mike Flynn. I just want to note this one for the record, as Ron Filipkowski has been following it, apparently. He says so in his tweet. I have been following this saga for days. He has here, I guess, the tweet of Jovan Pulitzer, about whom I know nothing. Apparently, he's a right-wing weirdo of some note. And this is kind of fantastical. Ron Filipkowski summarizes it this way. Basically, the guys behind the election fraud audits, and he puts those in scare quotes, are all sick. Did you know that? I mean, you knew that they were sick, like, sick in the head kind of sick. But now they're all physically ill after attending Mike Flynn and Clay Clark's, I don't know Clay Clark, big QAnon conference. And they believe, well, you know what's happening here. They got together in a large crowd, and then they all came away, and gosh, they're all, like, ill. Well, what do you think? What do you think could be causing that? But that can't be COVID, because COVID is a hoax, so we need it to be something else. So they believe, they've told themselves they believe this, that anthrax was pumped in to this meeting place. They met in a church somehow, and this is also very telling too. Like, you'd think, oh, well, gosh, that's kind of weird and crazy to think, oh, you got together in a common area and breathed on each other, and what your real problem is anthrax. It's anthrax that has, all the symptoms of COVID or whatever. But actually, it turns out that they claim that they're having different kinds of symptoms. But I don't know, what's weirder, that they all get together and get sick, and then they say it's not COVID, it's anthrax, or that they think the anthrax was pumped into the church to poison them, or that they thought that it was pumped in through the church's fog machines to poison them. And then if you are like me, a conservative when it comes to religion, you would say, what is a church doing with fog machines? What do you mean you pumped it in through the church fog machine? You pump it in through the church, air conditioning unit? Sure. Churches have air conditioning units. Fog machines? What fog machine? Like, they say it like it's standard equipment. And I guess in the kinds of evangelical churches that these guys go to, maybe it is. That's bizarre all by itself. No one has stopped. As far as I've seen no one stop and say, fog machine? What? You imagine, like, giving up your last dollar at the collection plate only to find out that they've bought a fog machine with it. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. Like, ooh, look out. God could come out from behind stage because fog. That's mysterious. Fog is mysterious. God's mysterious. It's a very easy leap to make. Anyway, yeah, so he also includes a screenshot of the tweet from Jovan H. Pulitzer saying, to my friends, tried to keep this under wraps. I don't know what kind of syntax he's using here. Try to keep this under wraps until, maybe he means so. So my friends tried to keep this under wraps. That was one word, under wraps. Until we knew what we were dealing with, but evidence with a capital E suggest that several of us were targeted by biological agents at an event. No punctuation, then just suddenly capital T. This has wreaked havoc on my system with all the most dangerous symptoms appearing. Scary, to say the least. Later on, by the way, I did see some sort of update about that from our own Mark Sumner, saying that I guess they were claiming a set of symptoms that would, in fact, be somewhat more, perhaps more in keeping with anthrax, say, than COVID. That they were developing some, itchy rash, and there were some lung complications, etc. Where's the tweet from Mark Sumner? Here we are. Somebody says, okay, well, here's Jovan Pulitzer's second tweet in his series, The Scary Symptoms. From rashes to blistering, passing blood, to 2 solid days of hallucinations, massive fever storms drenching me and not abating, but still no definitive diagnosis. Yet all I know is zombie symptoms would be easier than these symptoms. Okay, whatever, dude. And then somebody else is responding to this, says, I'm not defending him in the least, but here is what he says are his symptoms. Rashes, blistering, passing blood aren't typical COVID symptoms. That's true, but Mark Sumner pointing out with his tweet, hey there, Georgia Poison Control Center. What you got on ivermectin overdose? And here's the answer. Mild ivermectin toxicity in humans can cause rash, headache, dizziness, sleepiness, nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, diarrhea, and mild tachycardia. What do they say? There's a Y in there, like you'd feel like it, but it feels like it's difficult to pronounce. Tachycardia. Well, anyway, it doesn't sound good, but it doesn't sound all that far removed from what he thinks he's experiencing. That's a good thesis. Ivermectin overdose. It's entirely possible. Anyway, that's not what I came here to tell you about when I said that there were military aspects of stories, military stories that I've stored away here. Let me scroll down to try and find them. Yeah, I think here's where I wanted to stop. And I must have seen this thanks to the tweet that I put aside here from Alan Feuer. I don't know how he pronounces this. Feuer. Feuer. Not sure. Anyway, it's a long tweet series. I don't think I meant to necessarily look at the whole thing, but yeah, I guess this is where I picked up the tweet thread. Was in, let's see, 1, 2, 3 down here. Should I start at the top? This is from back on December 15th. Overnight, prosecutors unsealed new January 6th assault charges against 2 Texas men who styled themselves as leaders of the Patriot Boys, not the Proud Boys, but the Patriot Boys of North Texas. Here's a picture of them with Confederate flags on their helmets. What kind of patriots? I don't know. Anyway, charging documents say the men, Donald Hazard and Lucas Denny, coordinated their trip to D.C. with members of the Proud Boys and Patriot Prayer. I guess maybe they put the two together and made them into the Patriot Boys. The text exchange Denny and Hazard shared on Christmas Day 2020, almost coming up to the anniversary, in the run-up of their trip to D.C. for January 6th, with some highlighted bits here that say, we will need linking up with the Proud Boys, and tell your boss you're going to do your part saving the country from communists. So, you get the idea of where they are. But there's some more to the exchange. On New Year's Eve last year, Denny sent out a Facebook message, prosecutors say, noting that commanders of militias like himself were meeting on January 5th to organize and plan. He envisioned dealing with left-wing counter-protesters. Trump knows militia will protect people and property. And then a seemingly unknown militia guy from Texas is in possession of a quote-unquote rumor that Trump may be accompanying his crowd to the Capitol on January 6th, according to some of the exchanges here. A thought that Trump supposedly ad-libbed into his speech that same day. Where is Denny getting this information from, asks Alan Feuer. And Alan, by the way, covering legal matters for the New York Times, in case you were wondering who exactly he was. So that was a pretty good question. So you have these 2 militia guys, one doing a bunch of planning, and that's going to create a conspiracy case for you. And then 2, circulating the rumor that they heard ahead of time that Trump might accompany them to the Capitol, and the claim from Trump and the White House and everybody else that that was just an ad-libbed line as opposed to something they were telling people who were the ones making plans, the actual conspiracy folks, the people who were actually conspiring to do what they did on January 6th. That's pretty interesting and a good question. And that led me then to, I don't know whether Alan wrote this article or what, but I think next to it, the fact that these two things are running together tells me something here. But this is actually from Reuters. But another weird military connection here to January 6th, the big lie, etc. From Reuters, the military intelligence veterans who helped lead Trump's campaign of disinformation. So it's a little bit of a leap away from the day of January 6th and the planning of January 6th here. Still, we should spend some time perhaps with the just security question. But this is some more, I guess, background for it leading up to it. And maybe we can spend some time, reading off the air about the rest of the just security article and picking out highlights or reading it again tomorrow. Let me take a look at this Reuters piece from Aram Roston, Brad Heath, John Schiffman, and Peter Eisler, reporting from Dripping Springs, Texas, in case you were wondering. After Donald Trump lost the White House, ex-National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and 3 other current and former U.S. Army officers challenged the vote's legitimacy and pushed baseless conspiracy claims. And they all got together and got sick and got COVID and said it was anthrax. Military ethicists say their actions threaten to weaken the public's faith in democracy, and we really can't have any more of that. This is a December 15th article. Let's see what we can get through. It looks to be pretty long. During the Afghan and Iraq wars, the careers of 2 military officers often intersected. Army General Michael Flynn and an Army Reserve colonel named Phil Waldron, not Waldman, Waldron, worked together on secret projects in both countries. Doesn't sound good already. At least this is according to Waldron. When Flynn was appointed to run the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency in 2012, Waldron said he worked at the DIA's clandestine service. Flynn was an intel expert, sort of. Waldron's specialty was psychological operations, or PSYOPs. Ooh, so cool and tactical. Targeting foreign adversaries, as an Army field manual describes, to influence their emotions, motives, objective reasoning, and ultimately the behavior of foreign governments, organizations, groups, and individuals. Now the 2 military veterans, along with at least 2 other retired and reserve officers, are engaged in a new mission, this time with a domestic target. They are central to the far-right effort to persuade Americans that the 2020 election was stolen from then-President Donald Trump. So we're reading the story here not only of notorious spy Mike Flynn, formerly a general in the Army, but our own American Gaddafi, a ambitious colonel who also just sort of thought he might be able to take over the government of the country. You never know. Just give it a shot, right? For the past year, Flynn, Waldron, and other intelligence veterans have helped propagate some of the outlandish theories undercutting Americans' faith in democracy. They pitched false accusations to lawmakers and the public about how the election had been compromised, pushed spurious lawsuits to challenge its outcome, and bankrolled efforts to conduct partisan audits of the results. They provided briefings to members of Congress on methods for overturning the election, and worked alongside some of the leading actors in Trump's, quote, Stop the Steal movement. I think we're doing a huge service, Waldron told Reuters in an interview. In these efforts, Flynn, Waldron, and their colleagues publicly touted their military intelligence training. That's supposed to give them credibility. Like I would work with Chuck Todd, say, for instance, arguing that their expertise on the battlefield provided them special insight into alleged election fraud here at home in America. Sure, why not? The military men's false assertions are dangerous, said Roger Herbert, a former Navy SEAL captain and recently retired ethics professor at the U.S. Naval Academy. When retired members of the military, especially senior officers, broadcast wild conspiracies. America's trust in its military is somewhat eroded, said Herbert. But when those conspiracies contend that the current government of the United States is illegitimate, those primal fears of a standing army ready to turn its guns inward and topple our government are justifiably awakened. In short, these people are doing great harm to the legitimacy and efficacy of our military. So, Flynn did not respond to a request for comment for this article. A Trump spokeswoman did not respond to an interview request about the role military figures have played in his quest to overturn the election. One Army Reserve officer working with Flynn, Lieutenant Colonel Ivan Raiklin, is now facing an internal Army Reserve investigation over whether he violated reserve rules against partisan political activity, a military official told Reuters. In an election forum last month in New Hampshire, Raiklin, it's Raiklin, touted his military experience, Special Forces Commander, deployments battling the Taliban, and the MS-13 gang, I don't know what deployment that is, to say he has the intelligence wherewithal to find fraud. It has nothing to do with anything, but okay, I can find anything, I guess is what he's saying. So I have a little bit of experience looking at threats, right? He said, yeah, but not this kind. Anyway, Raiklin declined to be interviewed. Waldron says he and the Flynn circle are not using military techniques on Americans. He maintains, the actions they are undertaking for Trump don't undercut American democracy because he's convinced they are ferreting out voter fraud. The veterans' false claims shifted over time. What do you know? Amazing. They have pinned Trump's loss on actions by the Chinese government and voting technology companies, alleged misconduct by U.S. state and local election officials, and said hackers had used the internet to change votes after they were cast. They have blamed old-school ballot stuffing, perhaps involving dead voters, or Venezuelan interests. Though bogus, their claims and similar ones propagated by others have had major impact, inspiring Trump followers who participated in the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol and providing rhetorical fuel for continued efforts to discredit Joe Biden's victory. Despite no evidence to support these claims, nearly 6 in 10 Republicans believe the election was stolen, a Reuters Ipsos poll in October found. The military intelligence officers' battle is part of a larger Republican movement that has led disgruntled Trump voters to endorse threats of violence as a means to regaining power. As Reuters has documented, Trump supporters are waging a campaign of intimidation against election workers around the country. In a review of more than 800 emails, calls, and online posts made by backers of the ex-president, Reuters found that some of the military veterans' theories have been referenced in hostile messages to local election officials and featured in public campaigns attacking the vote's integrity. A false claim pushed by Flynn and his cohorts that voting machines were hacked to steal votes from Trump is a common theme in many angry messages. The machines, quote, are rigged to elect only those who care nothing for the people, unquote, said an email accusing election officials in Arizona, Yavapai. How am I pronouncing that? Yavapai, I guess, county? Gosh, they're probably well known, too. I only know Maricopa and Pima, but okay. They accused those election officials in this other county of complicity, of course, because why not? Invoking General Flynn by name, the writer added, every lie will be revealed, every traitor will be punished. Gosh, I hope so, but you'll be surprised at the outcome. Efforts by Flynn to help Trump overturn Biden's victory have been the subject of extensive reporting by a number of U.S. media outlets. The Reuters examination of Flynn and his colleagues provides new details about the origins of the former intelligence officials' collaboration and the extent to which they worked together in a bid to undo the 2020 election. That's what I'm here for. The reporting, based on interviews with participants, military ethicists, and others, plus an examination of Reuters' database of threats against election officials, reveals how Flynn drafted Waldron and others to actively contest the 2020 vote. Flynn and his small circle were distinctive because their military credentials provided a patina of respectability to even the most far-fetched claims. Among the military veterans to play a role in the Stop the Steal thing were Flynn, Trump's first national security advisor in 2017, who was involved in pushing the most dramatic of conspiracy claims. He urged the president to deploy the military to overturn the election in December of 2020, then went on a public speaking campaign sowing doubts about the vote and urging states to conduct their own reviews. Waldron, who insists Trump won. He gained attention last week when the House of Representatives committee investigating the January 6th riot revealed it was in possession of a PowerPoint presentation he'd shown to U.S. lawmakers outlining methods for overturning the election. We heard about the PowerPoint. Now we know where it came from. Or who was showing it to members of Congress. Anyway, it's Colonel Gaddafi over here. Earlier, he lobbied state officials and spoke on right-wing media about his stolen election theories. Waldron said Flynn drafted him to go public, saying, "No one else can do it. It needs to be done, so go ahead and do it." Then there's Raiklin, the lieutenant colonel of the Army Reserve, who was known Flynn since 2014, when he said they both worked on military intelligence matters. Raiklin is an attorney and a leading promoter of the Pence card theory, in which Vice President Mike Pence purportedly could have blocked the January 6th certification by Congress of Biden's victory. Then one other name we haven't heard yet, Seth Keshel, a former Army captain who worked in intelligence and who claimed to have developed statistical models that prove the 2020 election results were fraudulent. Okay. After the election, Keshel told Reuters he contacted Flynn on LinkedIn and they began collaborating. Keshel in August released an analysis which he claimed showed Trump won 7 states that went to Biden. Trump embraced the claim, saying the report came from a, quote, highly respected Army intelligence captain, unquote. And you see what's going on here is that they're using their position in the military as cover to give them credibility. And, of course, I guess it would fall to people like this. You know, it's one of the things you have to look out for, I think, in people who spend a lot of time in military intelligence and counterintelligence. Is to do the work properly, you've got to believe in your ability to see through the cover stories of others and to find the truth that the other side is trying to hide from you and has successfully hidden from everybody else, and you're the only experts capable of cutting through and finding the truth under the layers of lies. And once you convince yourself that you are, 1, capable of doing that, 2, capable of doing it all the time, and 3, never missing, and 4, that no one else can actually do this work, I guess that's how you find yourself, swimming against the tide, to say the very least, and pushing these conspiracy theories. And then people who are inclined to believe such things will probably tell themselves, well, these are the insiders. These are exactly the guys who have the resources to pull off operations like this and have seen it done. And so I need to listen to them because they'll have the insight. And sadly, it feeds on itself. All right, back to the story, though. Keshel told Reuters he stands by that assessment, that is that 7 states were improperly flipped to Biden, but never called for violence. You see, he just thinks that they stole the election, but you should just sit around, I guess. Sure. Personally, I believe the election was compromised, he said, adding, I can't control anybody else. Sounds like you can. Though they haven't worked together on every particular, the 4 have intersected in their efforts, with Flynn the common denominator. Raiklin has said he worked with Flynn. Keshel said he reached out to the general to share his concerns, and the 2 worked together in the weeks after the election. Waldron said Flynn pushed him to go public with his research. Keshel's work helped fuel calls by Trump followers in many states for audits of the election results. His analysis, which provided no documented evidence of fraud, was discredited by political scientists, statistical experts, and Republican and Democratic elections officials. In a post on Telegram, Keshel himself described his study as, quote, lenient. His work nonetheless spurred a torrent of emails to election officials in areas where his analysis suggested fraud. In Pasco County, Florida, a Republican county that Trump won, officials were deluged with emails demanding an audit after Keshel's report, even though he won. Keshel's analysis, quote, is literally devoid of statistical validity, said Brian Corley, the Republican county supervisor of elections. People just took it as fact. The Department of Defense did not respond to a request for comment on the Flynn Circle's activities. I'm sure they feel like they're not responsible for them, having purged these guys, for the most part, from the military many years earlier. A couple more people here, and we'll throw in another paragraph or two before we cut out for the break and then continue on the other side. Pauline Shanks-Corin, K-A-U-R-I-N, a professor of military ethics at the U.S. Naval War College, said a key issue is whether Flynn's associates are publicly citing their military training to lend legitimacy to a partisan political cause. Shall we investigate whether they're actually doing that after the break? Why not? Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We got one more segment to dedicate to this very long article, but I think, I don't know, I'm learning things as we go on, and sometimes I think we go down deeper rabbit holes than we need to, but, we can sort out the information together and decide what's important. But let me continue on with this. Remember, we left off with the notion from Pauline Shanks-Corin, the professor of military ethics at the U.S. Naval War College, that the key point here is, were Flynn and his associates publicly citing their military training to lend legitimacy to a partisan political cause? That is one concern. If you're talking to an audience that cares what General Flynn thinks, and trying to find one is difficult, and you tell the audience, I did this in the military, then they're more likely to be impressed, says Shanks-Corin. She said she was speaking in her personal capacity, not on behalf of her government employer. But, I think we can all understand. Yeah, if you're touting, the reason I know about finding out about any mysterious thing, whether it's election fraud or anything else, is because it was my job, my training, to uncover those things that the other side was trying to hide from me as part of my military experience. They're absolutely citing this stuff. Waldron disputes such criticism. Of course, I took an oath to protect the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and I believe that our republic is under attack from foreign and domestic enemies, he said. They want to undermine the republic through the election process, which is kind of like weird. Why have elections to establish a republic, of course, when we all know that the elections will just be manipulated. And so what we really ought to do, if we really want to preserve our republic, is turn it into a dictatorship. That's the brilliant way we will preserve the Constitution. Earlier this month, a Reuters reporter met with Waldron at One Shot Distillery, get it, One Shot, and Brewery, by the way. One Shot Distillery and Brewery, which he runs on Texas Hill Country's Whiskey Trail. Silver-labeled bottles of rum, vodka, and whiskey were on display as Waldron descended the stairs wearing a gray One Shot Distillery t-shirt with a Glock 19 in a holster fastened to his belt, of course. Waldron, with an affable bearing and a beard dappled with gray, retired as an Army Reserve colonel in 2016. He said he's fighting powerful forces in a quest for the truth. You talk about psyops, he said. I don't know how he sounds like, but I'm going to give him that voice. The election voting machine companies and the media have done the biggest psyop on the American people. Yeah, what is it? I don't know, but it's pretty big. Anyway, in a series of interviews this year, Waldron vowed he was on the cusp of breakthrough proof that the election was stolen. "We are decrypting the satellite packets right now," he said in January. In October, he cited a 37 terabyte tranche of data he believed could unmask fraud. I don't know what he's waiting for. Maybe he's drinking too much, but you'd think that they'd break through sometime soon if he was really any good. Next section here, a new mission. 4 days after the election, as ballot counts continued in a handful of swing states, the U.S. media projected Biden had won, establishing an insurmountable lead. Trump refused to concede. That day, November 7th, the former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, then Trump's lawyer, held a press conference in Philadelphia, the famous Four Seasons, in which he claimed the result had been swayed by suspect mail-in ballots and votes cast in the names of dead people. And I guess if you're doing this from a landscaping company, it's going to undermine your credibility, for sure. Okay. The next day, Waldron said he was on the phone with Representative Louis Gohmert, a Republican from Texas, a notoriously stupid Louis Gohmert. Waldron, who ran a cybersecurity company after leaving the military, but now, for some reason, that's out of business and he's distilling whiskey, said he has been researching vote hacking since August. Biden's victory accelerated his efforts. Waldron said he told Gohmert he had tracked internet traffic routed through a server in Frankfurt, Germany, and that definitely deserves dramatic music all by itself. Votes could be rerouted too, he told Gohmert. Election officials say this assertion is false and no evidence for it exists. But how do you like that? Louis Gohmert comes in and says, "What do you got?" And he says, I mean, look at the basic facts of what's said here. "Congressman, I've tracked internet traffic routed through a server in Frankfurt, Germany." Yeah, I mean, did you think that they didn't have the internet in Frankfurt, Germany? I mean, they have it, and it's going through a router. Oh, yeah, but votes can be rerouted too. Well, no, they can't. But what if, even if they could, what do you mean? You've told me they have the internet in Frankfurt, Germany, and votes can be rerouted. Two things, one of which isn't true, and the other of which has nothing to do with anything. But I guess, the implication, if you look at my eyes and how the way I raise my eyebrows and wiggle my nose and ears when I say it, is that the votes were somehow going through Frankfurt, Germany, and also being changed, which I didn't say, but, you're supposed to believe because that's why we're here. Gohmert immediately called Trump, Waldron said. A spokesman for Gohmert declined to comment, so I don't know whether that means he did or didn't immediately call Trump. But, Waldron's rep depends on his ability to move a United States federal elected official to immediately call the president. And all he told him was, there was internet activity in Frankfurt, Germany, and also votes can be manipulated by the internet. And so therefore they were manipulated in Frankfurt, Germany. I don't have proof of it, but there's both internet in Frankfurt, Germany and votes. Ta-da! And, if I were Gohmert, I wouldn't say I called the president based on that either. 2 days later, Waldron said he was on a plane to Washington. It started getting sporty about then, he said, with his theories gaining traction. First, he met with Sidney Powell, the lawyer for his old commander, Flynn. She ruined his case, of course. Waldron said he met Powell in a hotel conference room that functioned as her headquarters. Of course, why not? Briefing her in the early morning hours. A lawyer who worked with Powell, Howard Kleinhandler, confirms Waldron was part of the group. Powell declined to comment. Then Waldron huddled with Giuliani. We were supposed to have a 10-minute briefing, but it went 45 minutes, Waldron said. When Giuliani said he wanted to discuss voter fraud, Waldron said he pressed upon the former mayor that the fraud was on the larger and global scale. We kept going over it and going over it. He finally came aboard, he said. Giuliani did not respond to interview requests. He confirmed in a legal deposition that Waldron shared fraud allegations with him. Colonel in the military, great war record, Giuliani testified. I've had substantial dealings with him, and he's very, very thorough and very experienced in this kind of work. He is not, of course. By the second week of November, Waldron said he began working closely with Flynn. After a stellar military career, Flynn was appointed chief of the Defense Intelligence Agency by President Barack Obama, but was fired in 2014, in part because the two clashed over the general's hardline views on countering Islamic extremism. Flynn became a key 2016 Trump campaign advisor, and he was installed by the new president as national security advisor. By the way, the other reason I think that he was fired from the DIA was you're not allowed to install an internet connection in those offices for fear that information will leak out that way, and he said, F you, I'm doing it anyhow. And the only reason you would go ahead and do it anyhow is if you wanted to pump out information on the sly because you're a spy, and that's why I think he's a spy. Anyway, where were we? Yes, so a Trump advisor, he resigned weeks later after it was disclosed that he had held secret talks with Russia's ambassador about U.S. sanctions before Trump took office. Flynn pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about those talks. Trump would eventually pardon him for that. In the days after Biden won the 2020 election, Flynn had set up camp at the sprawling South Carolina estate of lawyer L. Lynn Wood, another supporter of Trump's effort to overturn the election. Wood told Reuters that Flynn and Powell arrived shortly after the election. So did Keschel, then working as a technology salesman. Flynn and Keschel stayed through Thanksgiving, where Flynn carved the turkey. Flynn himself carved the roast beast. The company, or rather the group, operating from a sitting room on Wood's estate, oh, how frou-frou to have a sitting room, created something of a clearinghouse for election fraud claims. They all appeared to be working together, Wood said. In an interview, Keschel said he spent his time scanning the numbers and helping write affidavits for lawsuits Powell was preparing. The crazy-ass Powell. There wasn't a lot of sleep going on there, Keschel said, and what would make things better for them than depriving themselves of sleep, because these idiots really could have used some. By the way, there's a picture here of Flynn carving the turkey at last year's Thanksgiving at Lynn Wood's home. Probably all gave each other COVID, but by the way, doing a terrible job of it and really mutilating the turkey. I mean, you can't even get a slice out here. He's awful at this. Plus, he's not even using a fork. He's just sticking his fingers in there, which is also kind of gross. Anyway, where were we? Powell's lawsuits helped fuel some of the hostility encountered by local officials. Georgia's Republican governor and Secretary of State debunked Powell's allegations of election fraud, citing audits and recounts affirming the state's tallies. In response, one angry emailer accused them of resisting further investigation, quote, because of the Sidney Powell lawsuits and vengeance and no other reason. We know China interfered with this election by remote and shipped mail-in ballots. That doesn't even make sense, but okay. A clandestine operative goes public is the next section here. 3 weeks after the election, Giuliani and his associates pushed a new strategy as well. Why not say that? Attempting to persuade conservative state legislatures to simply disregard the election results and declare Trump the winner of their state's electoral college votes. The Constitution, Trump's team argued, granted this power. It doesn't. With Pennsylvania a focus, Flynn dispatched Waldron to a state Senate hearing held by Republican lawmakers there. For decades, Waldron had operated behind the scenes, so he told Reuters in November of 2020 he initially resisted going public with his findings, but he said Flynn and Giuliani pressed him to testify about stolen votes. Rudy's team had asked me 3 times. On November 25th, wearing a blue jacket, blue shirt, striped tie, and a blue COVID mask, Waldron appeared in person at the Pennsylvania Senate hearing to air his fraud claims. He cited his military credentials, just as they said you shouldn't. I'm a retired Army colonel, 30 years, he said. Then he claimed all the voting machine technology in the United States could be hacked. Sure, why not just claim that? Our experts and other academics, Waldron continued, believe that up to 1.2 million Pennsylvania votes could have been altered or fraudulent. Only a detailed forensic analysis of the actual machines and software will truly show how many Pennsylvania citizens have had their civil rights violated. At the end of the hearing, President Trump joined in on the speakerphone. I've been watching the hearing on OAN, the far-right television news channel, Trump said. I'm in the Oval Office right now, and it's very interesting to see what's going on, which means he doesn't understand what's going on. He doesn't say anything about it. But then, there too, using the credentials of office, for credibility. I'm in the Oval Office right now. Waldron said he visited the White House later that day with Giuliani and others. That was great, he said Trump told them. The White House focus turned to pushing Republican-led legislatures in Pennsylvania, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Georgia to replace Biden electors with those for Trump. 5 states. That whole strategy started from that Pennsylvania hearing, Waldron said. That same day, Trump pardoned Flynn in the Russia inquiry case. I didn't realize it was that day. I mean, I'm sure it was there in the record, but no one has pointed that juxtaposition out to me before. In the end, no state legislatures swapped out their electors. Now Flynn helped pitch a new plan to Trump, because that one failed. Election by military might is the name of this section. On December 17th, Flynn told the right-wing cable news network Newsmax that the president could use the armed forces to conduct a do-over election in several swing states that he lost. Trump, he said, quote, could take military capabilities and place them in those states, and place them in those states and basically rerun an election in those states. No, you can't. I mean, there's just nothing in the world that says anything close to that. But they could do it. They could just do it and see if anyone stopped them, I guess. In that sense, they could. A day later, Flynn, Powell, and former Overstock.com CEO Patrick Byrne, because why not, met with Trump at the White House. They urged the president to deploy the U.S. government to make digital copies of the hard drives in some voting equipment, to investigate the machines and conduct recounts in at least 6 counties, Byrne told Reuters. Trump was receptive to the idea, said Kleinhendler, the lawyer working with Powell, but the government never took those steps. It is unclear why, and it's because no one else in the government was that stupid or crazy. At the same time, Army Reserve Officer Raiklin, a Flynn ally and former Green Beret, we didn't mention that earlier apparently, was pushing election fraud theories on social media and on right-wing websites. Raiklin describes himself as a constitutional lawyer, but he doesn't appear to practice that area of law, or maybe any. A Reuters review found he has not argued such a case or written scholarly articles on the topic. But what the hell? Just say you are one. On December 7th, a December 7th podcast, and in tweets, Raiklin laid out a plan to reverse the vote, alleging conspiracies involving Pence, intelligence agencies, big tech, China, and the Postal Service. So Pence was in on the conspiracy by December 7th, I guess. He urged Trump to, quote, activate the emergency broadcast system and use the hashtag #FightLikeAFlynn, as though that were going to mean anything to anybody. We, the people, are going to force this plan on them, he said. Raiklin's efforts drew attention on Twitter. On December 22nd, Raiklin tweeted a copy of a 2-page open memo to Trump detailing Operation Pence Card, even though he thought he was in on the conspiracy. The pitch, Pence acting as, quote, the representative of the federal seat of government, unquote, this is getting to be like sovereign citizen stuff, would reject votes from states where Trump alleged fraud, flipping the election. The memo was retweeted 23,700 times. Raiklin's conduct is now under government scrutiny. The Army Reserve's chief spokesman, Lieutenant Colonel Simon Flake, said Raiklin's superiors are, quote, aware of the situation and investigating, but that privacy rules restrict him from providing details. Flake added, the U.S. Army Reserve follows the Department of Defense's long-standing policy in regards to forbidding service member involvement in partisan political campaigns to avoid the perception of DoD sponsorship, approval, or endorsement of any partisan political candidate, campaign, or cause. Raiklin did not answer questions from Reuters about the inquiry. On New Year's Day, Keschel gave an interview carried on YouTube in which he said the election results were, quote, definitely irregular because they disrupted what he said were historical trends in U.S. elections. I served 1 tour in Afghanistan. Really? I mean, there were, by the way, people are serving like 5, 6, 7 tours in Afghanistan. This guy serves 1. And he's like, oh, I'm a big military operator, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it's very interesting that this would happen. I served 1 tour in Afghanistan, and I'm glad you did, whatever, thank you for your service kind of crap. I mean, I don't go in for that stuff normally. And I won't hear either. What the hell? Screw you for your service. You're an idiot, and you were a disservice more than anything else. And to lean on one tour as like this amazing insight into something that has nothing whatsoever to do with war in Afghanistan, election fraud? Come on. I served one tour in Afghanistan with a primary focus on understanding enemy activity. So what? They had guns. Understanding activity. They have guns and they shoot us. There you go. I understand the enemy activity now. I'm a colonel. Ta-da. Why not? If you're a constitutional lawyer, I'm a colonel. Anyway, or at least a captain. Is Keschel the captain? All right. I'm at least a captain. I think it's probably attainable. Anyway, now he said his focus is on unearthing the election's data irregularities. Those guys have guns. We should shoot at them and then run away if we can't kill them. And call somebody else to shoot some other bigger weapons at them so that they do get killed. There you go. Election. I can do that too. Anyway, next up, conspiracy PowerPoint. In early January, Waldron said he flew to Washington bearing a 36-page PowerPoint presentation that he helped prepare. Now we know something of the provenance. Okay. Its goal was to convince Congress and the White House the election was stolen and Pence should stop the certification of Biden's win. This month, the House committee investigating the Capitol riot said Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, produced a copy of that PowerPoint in response to a subpoena. Waldron's presentation was called Election Fraud, Foreign Interference, and Options for January 6th. A very military way of saying January 6th. Anyway, Jan, like all caps too, Jan. He said he briefed legislators on Capitol Hill on January 5th, explaining a document whose recommendations included declare national security emergency and declare electronic voting in all states invalid. Sure, I wish I could get a chance to present some of my things that are equally nutty sounding, but at least have a better basis in reality. No one ever invites me to do that. I'm stuck with the blogs, but this guy gets to fly in and tell these guys this. Waldron's pitch mirrored arguments being made to Trump, who at the time was publicly urging Pence to refuse to certify Democratic electoral votes from a handful of swing states and either declare Trump the winner or not declare a winner at all. Waldron proposed going further, such as deploying U.S. Marshals. Oh, yeah, the Marshals of the Supreme Court, sure. Deploying U.S. Marshals and the military to seize ballots nationwide. No optics problems there. A trusted lead counter. It's capitalized like it's a title. A trusted lead counter will be appointed with authority from the POTUS to recount all the votes, the PowerPoint said, and of course, they'll be trusted by everybody. Here's a couple of the frames of the slides of the PowerPoint, including one with all kinds of crazy, it's such a wild chart with arrows and dotted lines all over the place. Hallmark sign of a cartoon conspiracy. Anyway, continuing on, U.S. Marshals will immediately secure all ballots, all of them, every single one, and provide a protective perimeter around the locations in all 50 states, the PowerPoint said. The federalized National Guard in each state will be supplied detailed processes and be responsible for counting each legitimate paper ballot. The National Guard is going to count it because they're good at that. On January 5th, Flynn told a pro-Trump crowd at Freedom Plaza in Washington, D.C., "We will not stand for a lie." The House committee investigating the January 6th riot has subpoenaed Flynn to testify about his efforts to overturn the election. I can tell you how that's going, too. Not well for him, by the way. The court has ruled on that. I'm not going to get to that story today, probably, but maybe we'll share the details tomorrow. A week after the attack, Waldron told Reuters he blamed Pence for the chaos. Pence's offense, he said, was to refuse to go along with the plans to block Biden's certification. That was the riot's primary cause, he said. You could logically argue that he had more to do with inciting the riot than anyone else on that stage, he said. That seems like that's going to get you in trouble there, Mr. Waldron. The Secret Service had to evacuate the vice president from the Capitol complex during the riot. Videos show some of the rioters who stormed the Capitol chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." A spokesman for Pence declined to comment. Congress's votes in the early morning hours of January 7th to ratify Biden's victory brought an end to nearly all of the Trump camp's efforts in the courts to keep him in power. After that, it was pencils down, said Powell colleague Klein Hendler. There was just nothing else to do. The Flynn circle wasn't ready to let go. Next up comes the Arizona audit. Everett Stern, a Republican U.S. Senate candidate in Pennsylvania who runs a private intelligence firm, said he was approached in April, remember this guy, by two Republican political operatives who urged him to gather information on elected officials to help prompt a state audit of the 2020 vote. They also helped connect him with Raiklen, said Stern, who said the operatives told him that they were acting at Flynn's direction. Stern said he declined to take part because he viewed the approach as an extortion attempt and alerted the FBI, which said it had no comment. In Arizona, Republicans in the state Senate pushed for a, quote, forensic audit of the vote in the state's largest county. Arizona Senate President Karen Fann turned to, of course, Florida cybersecurity contractor Don Logan to do the job. Logan's firm, Cyber Ninjas, had no experience running audits on our elections, though Logan said he had done previous work reviewing 2020 election disputes. He said so, he just didn't have it. Logan told Reuters he wasn't sure how his company was picked for the task. He said he didn't submit a proposal until Fann contacted him. Logan did have connections, though. He confirmed to Reuters that he was among those who huddled with Flynn at Woods Estate after the election. And he received an endorsement from Waldron, who called him, quote, very reputable, in a text message to Senator Fann before she selected him to run the audit. Records released in a public records lawsuit show. So now we're getting some understanding of where Cyber Ninjas came from, where the PowerPoint came from, where all of this stuff came from. One or two lone nuts who are just, working together and flying around the country and having Thanksgiving dinner together. But not a conspiracy. We did things the right way, Logan said. Through a spokesman, Fann declined to comment. The Arizona Senate audit cost $5.7 million, largely financed by Flynn's team. Nearly $1 million came from a nonprofit called America's Future, which until then had been largely dormant, IRS filings show. Flynn now chairs its board. His brother, Joe Flynn, was a director, and his sister, Mary O'Neill, not a Flynn, but an O'Neill, was executive director. That sounds weird, too. Joe Flynn declined to comment. O'Neill did not respond to a request for comment. Michael and Joe Flynn also briefly served as directors of Powell's nonprofit Defending the Republic, which kicked in $550,000 for the Arizona audit. Just a few interlocking nonprofit directorates and self-dealing, no big deal. Another $3.5 million came from the America Project. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, I like some dramatic, patriotic music, please. Whose website features a video from Flynn declaring, our great nation was under a new type of attack, one that no one could see except me. Joe Flynn is one of the nonprofit's 3 board members and Flynn its senior strategic advisor. The America Project's chief executive, former Overstock CEO Byrne, told Reuters, Flynn asked me to come down and set this up. Flynn is a driving force to continue fighting the results of the 2020 election, said the group's operations officer, Carl Johnson. The America Project told Florida regulators it's expected to raise $50 million this year, records show. Byrne said the group raised closer to $10 million, mostly from him. The resulting Arizona audit featured reviewers with little training who scrutinized ballots using procedures that were widely criticized by election experts. Logan defended the auditing work. The review confirmed Biden won. This November 19th, retired Captain Keschel and current Reserve Lieutenant Colonel Raiklen were featured speakers at an election integrity, quote-unquote, rally in Manchester, New Hampshire, citing polls saying a growing number of right-wing Americans believe the election was rigged. Raiklen and Keschel told a crowd of about 75 that their movement is succeeding. Noting his legal and military intelligence background, Raiklen laid out what he called a deep state conspiracy theory of a stolen election. I connected the dots, Raiklen told the crowd. Keschel, now a paid consultant for the America Project, said Trump supporters faced a two-front war auditing the 2020 election and preparing for 2024. It sounds a little crazy, Keschel said, but I do believe wholeheartedly, we need our music here, that the future will reflect the truth of the 2020 election, that Joe Biden was illegitimately elected. Both men received standing ovations. And we've made it to the end of the article. That was pretty fascinating and pretty long, but just shows, I guess, kind of the depths of crazy that we're dealing with. But at least we now know which crazy people were at the root of, let's say, propagating the PowerPoint. We're going to want to know that. And how early were they working on trying to worm their way into the inner circles of crazy so that they could get their crazy fantasies validated and paid for? And how weird is it that the Overstock.com guy and the Pillow guy are just hemorrhaging money to pay for all this stuff? These guys are just living large on other weirdos' money. And, nothing new under the sun, I guess. Okay. Well, anyway, I thought I would bring that up for you. I think maybe a more serious look is in that Just Security article, but very interesting in terms of how active actual military commanders at the time made their decision. And remember that Flynn's got another brother that's somehow mixed up in all of this too. Anyway, we'll be back tomorrow, which will be sort of our the day of Christmas Eve show, and bring you what we can in a weird mix of the long read stuff I've been saving for you. And now, Justice Putnam, of course, brings you the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I'm sure there's plenty we've missed today. Thankfully, he's here to pick up the pieces.
FromNetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
See what he's got here. The insurgent GOP already have blood on their hands from the violent rhetoric that they've been circulating. And then prosecutors want a 4-year sentence for the Chicago banker convicted of delivering $16 million in loans to Paul Manafort. Well, why not look into that? That seems connected. What a fun story to follow up with. Stay tuned.